Hello and welcome to Invisible Walls. I'm Ryan Stevens. We have Patrick Morales, Chris Nguyen, and Daniel Bloodworth. Marcus is out on his extended honeymoon. And you know what? I listen to a lot of This American Life, and I'm stealing one of their ideas. And we're going to do 10 topics. I'm going to kick things off with, guys, how much does reverse compatibility matter? Because I'm thinking more about this Sony thing and their weird Gaikai stuff that's happening. I know, to me, I know Bloodworth, you went out and bought a PlayStation the second you heard they were getting discontinued hardware emulation, PlayStation 3. I've been happy with my software emulation. But you know, we are a particular core of this audience.
Yeah, I mean, we're the guys, like, we're gonna keep that freaking that PlayStation 1 game around. You know, we're not gonna get rid of it. We're gonna pop it in now and then, especially for us because we do so much retrospectives and things like that.
But that's work. I mean,
yeah.
You
but
know,
I mean, like, I kept all of my stuff anyways. You know, like, I still have my NES and everything. So you know.
My mom threw all my stuff away. She saved the comic books. She saved the comic books and threw away the games.
Yeah, the fewer systems I have to actually hook up, and others that I can just put on the shelf, the better, you know.
Yeah, I do feel like reverse compatibility is definitely, you know, I always like to be like, well, over in Japan, you know, we're like, the size of the original Xbox is actually a concern, you know, for people in small apartments.
I remember the photos of like Japanese people pointing and laughing at the original Xbox.
Well, the thing's like 30 pounds. The controller too. But I mean, I'm curious, like your guys' opinion. I mean, how important is reverse compatibility to you guys?
I mean, it matters a lot to me because I'm the kind of guy that, you know, I like playing a lot of games, but in terms of actually owning them, I don't really buy that many. You know, I like borrowing.
How many Steam games do you have?
Not a whole lot, not as much as you'd think. But still, like, you know, I have a ton of PS2 games. I probably have more PS2 games than I do PS3 games at this point. And it matters a huge amount to me if I'm not able to, you know, carry that over into my next system. And certainly bears, you know, a considerable, you know, impact if I can't play that.
Yeah, I think the other thing too is that, you know, since I did get the PS3, and that is probably what I will play rather than hooking up a PS2 or PS1, since I already have my save files already integrated into that. PS3 is kind of a big, bulky system to keep around. You know, it's not like the old slim PS2 where it's like, okay, well, just pull it out whenever.
I mean, I know like Microsoft kind of shoehorned, you know, they were like, got to make sure Halo 2 works on the 360.
I hate that because every time like you want to play an Xbox game, it's like you got to do the wiki and then like
see if it works.
And okay, it has this weird issue. Do I want to deal with that?
Is it a Band-Aid? Like, especially since like look at the Wii U right now. I mean, I know Lego came out, but it's been a drought. You know, and I know like Need for Speed's coming out, but that's an up port again, or is it even an up port? I don't know, but
it sounds like it's pretty good.
But it's an older game,
right?
You know, and like, and even jumping into that Wii menu is kind of an ordeal to play your old games. I mean, compared to, you know, reverse compatibility on the PlayStation 3.
Yeah, but you can kind of see there that it's going on that same sort of philosophy of they're not really compatible. They just stick things in there to make it work. You know, it's like the entire Wii menu is separate from the Wii menu.
Do you think it is an actual selling point, though? Like, do you think like people are like, oh, cool, I can play my old games on here? Or maybe I can sell my old console and get a couple bucks?
I think there are a lot of people, especially in that first, you know, 2-year early adopter window, where people want the new system, but they might not necessarily be able to get it, you know, or they might have to convince a wife or a mother or somebody, you know, to be able to get one. It's like, you already have a video game system. Yeah.
And it's also annoying because it seems like you can never win because, you know, you have these old games that might not be reverse compatible later on. So you think, okay, well, I guess I'll buy the HD re-release of it. But now you find out you can't use the PS3 version, you know, on the PS4.
Well, I was upset I couldn't play Guitar Hero.
Yeah.
On my Guitar Hero. I didn't even have 2, but even 1, I wanted to pop it in, you know, play some Bowie or something.
Yeah, I had 2, and that was the main reason that like I hung around with the PS2 for a little bit.
Any thoughts, Chris?
I'm only 5 years old, so I've only lived in one gen. I don't have what's backwards.
No, man, you have your old DDR games that you can't play on anything but CRT monitors.
Yeah, actually, that does make me concerned too. Like, you know, in the future, like, will I be able to get monitors or TVs that, you know, would be good for my old systems?
Well, what I think is interesting is that Virtual Console on Nintendo, those are handmade emulators wrapped. I mean, that's why the files are way bigger than the ROMs. Not that I know how big ROMs are, but you know, they're hand-wrapped, hand-tinkered emulators so things work. But still, if you download Punch-Out on an LCD monitor, you're not going to beat Mike Tyson, or it's not Mike Tyson, what is it, Mr. Dream?
Right.
You're not going to beat him. Those timings, it's not going to work. Justin's not in this half of the show right now, but I know if Justin was here, he'd talk about how he had an Atari 7800, and his dad would come home with just like piles of 2600 games, and it was like Christmas every day.
Yeah.
His parents loved him a lot. Well, I think that was our first topic. Let me see. I'm going to pass it over to Daniel Bloodworth. What would you like to discuss for a brief amount of time?
Yeah, I mean, now I'm starting up the new Backtrack episodes and stuff, so like music and games has been on the brain a lot, and I actually got a cool opportunity to go to the BAFTA thing that Jeff hosted and about Tomb Raider, where they basically did this huge like expose on the making of the game, and the composer Jason Graves was there playing his crazy instrument. And it's just interesting to me to be talking to different people, audio directors and composers and stuff, and how many different like philosophies and approaches there are to game music. Because you kind of think in the same traditional sense of like, oh well, game music has to loop and game music has to have these dynamic things in them. And when I talked to the audio director for the original BioShock, it's like, she specifically didn't want any dynamic or any looping music. Like she put all of that stuff in there by hand and kept it very sparse so that you could just kind of soak in the rest of the world as well. So it's interesting to hear that side of things, and then to hear with Jason Graves also, he didn't want looping music, but there's still a lot of like dynamic stuff going on in Tomb Raider. So and just all of these different approaches and nobody else is talking.
Yeah, I'm interested.
I mean you're kind of going on like a fluid point. I mean I know we can all talk about games and music. Like I love music and games, but I was the guy when we were doing the end of the year stuff who loves Journey, and I'm like, wait, Journey had good music? I'm like, oh yeah, it did. Like sometimes it's not always sticky with me, and I'll fully admit that.
And that's the other thing too is, like
I got into a Twitter fight with what's his name, Austin.
Oh yeah.
Wintory, because I found out he did music for a game for like Zynga or something, and I was like,
yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's so weird that he did Journey and that, and he's like, why is that so weird? Got to make ends meet. I'm like, I'm so sorry. Twitter, anyone can see what you write.
I mean, yeah, on that same note, I think we had a conversation about this a long time ago, but it's also interesting just to see the kind of different approaches that, a Japanese soundtrack might take as opposed to a Western one. Yeah. I think the one observation that we made was that, like if you think about Japanese soundtracks, maybe along the lines of like, Koji Kondo, where it's more melodic, like it's an actual theme that you kind of resonate with, you memorize.
Yeah.
When Western soundtracks are kind of more cinematic, more ambient.
But I'm seeing more and more themes start to come in. Like with Mass Effect, and Tomb Raider's theme is very clear. Sure. Assassin's Creed 3's theme is very clear. Sometimes I feel like they do kind of grab a main theme and just kind of like rework that over and over rather than having different themes.
Have you guys seen that phenomenon where people are taking pop songs and changing the, I'm going to get this wrong, but changing them from like minor scale to major scale?
Oh,
so they're making depressing songs happy and happy songs depressing.
Yeah.
Have you, like I did it for REM, Losing My Religion, and suddenly it's like Shiny Happy
People
Part 2.
I saw the video.
And it's cool. Like I studied some like electronic music stuff. Anton, who's running camera right now, knows some of this stuff. But like people that mess around with like Kemas and like Markov chains and all this weird stuff. You can make music that doesn't sound like noise, but can still have this like interactive element. And we've all interviewed some audio directors, and you see them with their little kind of flowchart dolphin things where like, this feeds into that, like you were saying, for like dynamic music.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to sacrifice, dynamism doesn't have to sacrifice, I think, like original intent.
Right.
It can kind of just like flavor what's going on.
Yeah. And
we have to play everything with music off. So our life is hell.
I actually kind of rebel against that as much as possible.
Yeah, I'll probably get in trouble for this, but I found amazing things by turning on the music in BioShock Infinite while doing the review. I think that I'm allowed to say that.
Yeah.
You'll have to wait for the review or probably watch IGN's that's up right now. IBM's.
But yeah, I mean, and going back to your point though about not noticing things, it's amazing how different my perception of the music is after I do one of these interviews and then I go back to the game to capture. Like I was picking up on like every cue in the original BioShock when I was replaying that. Just It's like, oh, like this song is playing now at this specific moment. It's not like there's just like, you know, random things playing on the radio. Like they have a intent put in there.
But you got a sensitivity to it, so it was right. It was kind of easier to.
Yeah, I mean, it's easier to see what they're doing when you've actually heard them, you know, explain it.
Hey, Chris, is Butterfly the best DDR song?
Nope.
No.
No
Anything
way.
by Naoki is.
Okay.
Anyway, no. Really quick on music, like, you know, there's the two approaches. Like there's it's what is it, diegetic, non-diegetic. You know,
Right,
it's where it's like
forced in,
part
or
of
if
it.
it's part
It's
of
part,
the
like for
narrative.
BioShock, it's like running on a record player or something, and you're going and listening to it. You know, and it adds it serves a purpose for you to feel more, you know, enveloped in a world, or it's just to boost a mood, like in Batman Arkham City. As soon as you start kicking people's ass, you know, it's like dun 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 dun, dun, you know, like all this crazy music, and then as soon as you finish the last guy, and it slows back down to the, you know, the more subtle.
Or it's DMC, and you're like, we actually took some user topics off of Twitter. This is from Big A Texas, I guess, Big A_TX. I know there's been difficulty in games, and he's wondering if should developers give patches to fix them, and he's talking about the God of War Ascension and the elevator ride.
Or are you saying like patch it so that part's not so hard?
Yeah, I guess that's happening. The thing I kind of remember is Half-Life Episode 1, which isn't waiting for an elevator. I think elevators are just like tied to difficulty. But I believe it's the part, I really like that part. I believe it's where you're holding a flashlight and Alex Vance is shooting. Do you guys remember this at all?
I think so.
So you're not really, maybe you do have a gun at that point, I'm not entirely sure. But you know, Valve has all their crazy stats. You can see their kill maps, right, in Team Fortress and stuff, and they're like, oh, we need to tweak this. People aren't passing it. And it is kind of weird that, like, you know, people argue about movies, you know, like what, George Lucas messing up movies, or, you know, E.T. now has
the remasters and stuff.
They all have walkie-talkies instead of guns, and they're changing the spirit of the movies instead of it being like a director's cut. It's like, you know, it's fans being a little bit pissy. But I do kind of like the idea of like the original, kind of seeing the original vision, even if it is kind of messed up. And you know, bugs and stuff. I know Dark Souls got really patched. I was cursed down to quarter life, and now I think it's max half-life for cursing. But you can uninstall those patches. But it kind of goes back to the idea, I think, of like archival too, where it's kind of interesting to see these things as they were, even though they are becoming more and more of an evolving media, even for things. I used to think it was just for MMOs, but like Team Fortress has completely changed, right?
Yeah, I mean, like in terms of fixing something that is blatantly broken, then I guess it's permissible in that sense. But as someone that is, you know, really invested in stuff like fighting games and competitive type, you know, genres, I am intrinsically against it, just because I feel like over time, you know, you never know if something might come up where there's an alternate strategy, or people might just be approaching it wrong. And oftentimes it's because of little kind of situations like that people come up with the most creative solutions.
Well,
So-
yeah, I mean, didn't combos come out of a bug?
Yeah.
You know, so we wouldn't have had combos.
Fighting games was built on a lie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
well, I mean-
anyway, Capcom will just release, you know, a new version of the game anyway instead of putting out a patch, right?
Well,
Yeah.
What you were saying about God of War, though, that was really, I mean, that was so that you would learn your whole skill set, right? So, I mean, are they dumbing it down so you don't have to do that? I feel like in a situation like that, that might be kind of wrong.
Yeah, patching games to make them easier so that more people can beat the game. I just don't. It kind of like devalues the idea of beating the
might as well
game,
ju-
right?
yeah.
I paid my money, give me my achievements.
Yeah, no, but wasn't there like a recent study or fact or whatever where like not many people actually beat the games anyway?
Right.
It's like, you know, people play it and they stop at like 30, 50%. They don't even beat the games. So really, you're making games easier for the people that aren't beating the games in the first place. Well, that's my
Yeah,
theory,
they're trying
at
to
least.
raise that stat. There's, you know, all these people that.
But
think
I mean,
that's
look at
super important.
like I remember like one of the last games next to Dark Souls, but one of the last games I was like, oh my god, you beat that game, was like Ninja Gaiden on the Xbox when that came out. It was like, that was a really hard game, you know. Like a lot of people, I had to actually stop for like 8 months and then I continued it because I was just like, I can't.
Which is like
complete
1/3 of your life.
it. I know. What if I'm 4? No, but like I actually had to stop because I just couldn't do it. I played other games and I came back to it and I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna beat this game, and I finally did. And I was like, oh man, you know, that was like, I don't get that anymore. Like except with exception to Dark Souls, but. Or you know, it's like now you feel like you're consuming games like they're movies. It's like, oh yeah, I beat that. Oh, it's like, oh yeah, I watched that. You know,
They're the mass market. They're spending millions of dollars. They want to have people feel like they're gonna get through it. I feel like I I mean, that's a bigger question.
Yeah.
But
That's
speaking
a
of bigger
whole issue.
questions, let me throw it over to you, Chris. What would you like to talk about?
My topic is environments, like video game environments. Let's scale back the scale, shall we say? I'm kind of getting aggravated with really blown out of proportion scale cities and stuff like that in games. But they
When
have
there's nothing to do
But
in
there's nothing there. I mean, yeah, there's the drastic example of LA Noire, but
Mafia 2.
Mafia 2. But
Well,
like
I
even something like say Grand Theft Auto 4, like it was the only times like the scale of that recreation of New York City as Liberty City like really stood out is every time you're doing something like an aerial view. It's like, Jesus, this is a lot of stuff happening at once. But anytime you had to drive from point A to point B, you just kind of shut off. Like, you don't really get a sense that you're driving by people's houses, businesses, real things happening. I would much prefer a Grand Theft Auto. Like, this is never going to happen, but I would much prefer a Grand Theft Auto that is the size of half of the islands in Grand Theft Auto 3, where every building is
What
enterable.
did you think about Red Dead then? Which wasn't really
I have not
city-based.
played Red Dead.
Okay.
I still need to play it.
I mean, my problem is
terrible, but-
if you show me buildings and I can't go in them, it kind of turns me off a little
Yeah,
bit.
everything's a
At
Disneyland
least
ride.
Red Dead
Don't
was
touch-
like
don't touch the
wilderness,
environment,
and
yeah.
it was all kind of plotted out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I just finished playing through Xenoblade, and that is just all about massive scale, and it's this weird love-hate relationship, right? Because on the one hand, like seeing that scale and actually being able to go to pretty much any of those areas is great. But at the same time, there was and Anton's going to hate me because probably don't have this footage anywhere, but there's this city called Alchemoth that you get to about midway through the game, and
like 70 hours in.
it takes you forever just to like walk around that city and explore it and make sure that you've talked to all the NPCs and gotten your side quests.
How cool was the Citadel in Mass Effect 1? You
Yeah.
know? That was like a 7-hour layover in like this. Yeah, of course it's supposed to have a gazillion people and doesn't feel exactly like that, but it did feel like it afforded a lot of what a city should be in a game. My prime example, I always go back to Mario 64, where those worlds aren't that big, but they're so nuanced. Getting the 100 coins, you really felt like you owned that space once you got all of the stars. But you know what game did kind of make scale a little smaller? SimCity.
Oh.
It's a little city there.
Does it feel more real? Well, I mean, this is just coming off the back of like, I mean, I just finished playing Luigi's Mansion, and again, that like the whole, every little thing in the environment has like some sort of presence, and it's not just a titanium cup that's glued to a titanium table with paint on it. Like like every FPS or feels, it's like you can see a table, you can see a cup, you can see a bottle, but they're like permanently affixed. It's look but don't touch, right? I think if a game developer started thinking about scaling down but making things dense and more believable and more realistic and reactable, an environment that's reactable to the player, I mean, Minecraft, that has scale too.
Peter Molyneux's room where you can do anything you want. Sure. Or I mean, again, I can't say too much about it, but we were looking at Gone Home, Steve Gainer's new game.
I'm excited for that.
Which is I don't know how interactive it's really going to be, but you can really look into everything, kind of examine everything.
I guess it's hard to find that balance, right? Because what Chris mentions is basically the antithesis of, the tightly scripted kind of like theme park experience that a lot of games do, and that can be equally as bad,
Yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, that's very true. But I guess with the whole scripted theme parks, epic, crazy set piece events, it's like, have games have you revisit environments again, like it doesn't need to be big. It's just if you constantly revisit the same environment, it's as a small, like it's like if you had a whole game that took place in a 60-story building and you never could go outside the building, and you had to constantly visit people on different floors, you know what I mean? Like you start gaining a sense of familiarity and intimacy to a building versus Liberty City, which has 5,000 buildings.
Symphony of the Night, Goaty.
Yeah, backtracking done right. And Patrick, is there something you would like to talk about?
Actually, yeah. I want to talk about.
blows.
I want to talk about whether or not the Kickstarter bubble is going to pop anytime soon. I think when you think about the sudden success of Kickstarter, a lot of people look towards Double Fine as being kind of the benchmark for the first wave of success. And just keeping track with the documentary that they're putting out, their whole.
Did you Kickstart it?
I did, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Just keeping track of what they've been doing so far. It's a year now since they've fully funded it for $3.3 million. We're starting to see a little bit of the warts and the wrinkles behind the process. They're not exactly hitting all the things they wanted to. They've had to cut a lot of content potential content out of the game. And I'm just wondering, if something like Double Fine, might be faltering a little bit, what could this mean for the other ones that might not be as, well funded?
Well, I'll just be real quick. I mean, this was always my kind of concern, is that as much as we want to say we hate publishers, they give that horrible, horrible structure and deadlines and milestones to people.
Yeah.
And it's one of those weird calculus problems where Double Fine is not a giant company, but it's a pretty big company, and they have a lot of people working on stuff, and they're still doing cool stuff. I mean, if people haven't checked out the Double Fine Amnesia Fortnite stuff, there's some really crazy stuff going on.
Totally.
But you still need some sort of kind of taskmaster sometimes, especially if you feel like you're beholden to people, and that Kickstarter kind of does remove that. You may feel like you're beholden to your donators, but you're not really legally obligated. But then I look at games like, I mean, I think everyone here got into FTL, right? Yeah, FTL is like totally. Crack cocaine. FTL, that was mainly a two-man group. I have no clue if they delivered on time, to be honest. I was late to the party on that one.
Yeah, well, I think the other...
Legend of Grimrock, again, two or three or four people making a really cool game. So I'm not sure if it's size versus money versus location. I mean...
But I think the other thing, too, though, is that I feel like... the way these Kickstarter things work, and you're talking about the documentaries, I feel like there's another layer of transparency that we don't usually get. Going back to the Tomb Raider thing I went to earlier this week, I saw stuff in that, behind the scenes stuff, that a publisher would never put in a dev diary, except for maybe a snippet over some guy's shoulder or something, just really basic animatics and previs stuff. And and yeah, I mean, in development, when you actually start working on something, things go wrong, things go to dead ends, and you try to figure out just like any kind of creative medium, it's like the piece kind of shapes itself in a way, and you have to find the right direction, and sometimes you don't get that from your initial vision.
Yeah, I mean, with the ambitiousness of something like all the Kickstarter projects, I sometimes worry if expectations are going to go somewhere that maybe they shouldn't be. On both sides, not just for people investing in these things, but also on the developer end. In Exile, who's working on, the Planescape sequel and Wasteland 2, they're doing those things at the same time. It's can you really devote that much manpower on two projects at once?
They're cloning Chris Avalon.
Yeah. So,
probably.
I mean, I love Kickstarter. I think it's a great kind of workaround to the publisher conundrum that a lot of developers have to deal with. I just hope that it's sustainable and
if you don't get Hoops Berkeley for 2 years, will you be pretty upset?
I'm gonna boycott crowdfunding altogether.
Okay. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Let's do this again sometime.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for more topics on Invisible Walls.